I've tried writing and rewriting this script multiple times over the past several months, and every time I do, I end up with a 7-hour-long extensive deep dive into the framework. So instead of getting sidetracked, I'm just going to give you the brief introduction to how I came to adopt this as a living framework, what it is, and what I'd like to do with it moving forward. You see, most arguments about God are built like a haunted house. You walk in, everything is dark, people are yelling about first causes and necessary beings and absolute truth, and by the time you get out, nobody can tell whether they actually found anything or just got spooked by the furniture. I think the problem starts way earlier than the argument, because before I ask whether God exists or whether religion is true, I need to ask a simpler question. How do I know anything at all? And that question is the launching point for what I'm calling relational atheism. Relational atheism starts with a very unromantic observation. None of us have magical read access to reality. We do not get to step outside the universe, inspect it from above, and compare our ideas to reality like we're checking answers in the back of a book. What we have is interaction. We poke reality. Reality pokes back. And over time, we build models out of the patterns that survive repeated contact. That's what I mean by methodological probing. Methodological probing is just a discipline of intellectual hygiene. It means you restrict your claims to what can be probed through interaction, either directly or indirectly through consequence, instrument, traces, constraints, predictions, or error correction. Reality, in that sense, is a black box, not because it's fake, not because nothing is real, but because we only ever meet it through interface. And this sounds abstract until you start to make it physical. If you kick a rock and your foot hurts every single time, you do not need access to the rock's hidden metaphysical essence to know something real happened. You got stable feedback. You interacted with something that pushed back in a reliable way. When a child burns their hand on a hot stove, there isn't some platonic form of hotness that transfers its essence into the child's hand. The child received stable feedback and learned what hot means. The hot object pushed back in a reliable way. And this is important because I think a lot of philosophy gets drunk on nouns. It starts treating words like existence, truth, and being as if saying them in a serious voice conjures up some deep cosmic authority. Relational atheism pulls the plug on that performance. It says, if you want me to treat something as real in an explanatory sense, then you must show me what it does. Show me how it enters the web of interaction. Show me what difference it makes. Don't show me something that acts on behalf of something else. Show me the direct interaction that actualized. And before somebody hears the word we and imagines a spooky little soul driving the body like a stolen rental car, no, that is not what I mean either. We are not magical observers floating outside the system. We are stabilized loops of interaction ourselves. We are patterns inside the web, probing other patterns inside the web. No ghost pilot required. That's essential because otherwise people hear phrases like observer and smuggle dualism through the side door wearing fake glasses and a mustache. Now, once you start with interaction instead of metaphysical prestige, a lot of the old debate begins to look strangely outdated. Let's take the word truth. People talk about truth with a capital T as if they can compare their map to reality itself from some neutral platform outside reality. But we can't do that. We do not have a God's eye dashboard. We have models, contact, correction, and repeatability. So relational atheism makes a very specific pivot. It does not organize itself around truth. It organizes itself around actuality. Not truth as a floating metaphysical trophy, actuality as what has actually shown up through interaction. We don't pretend to have truth. In fact, I would argue that truth is impossible to achieve given the limited nature of black box interaction. Actuality, however, is what shows up. What survives contact? What produces stable feedback? What continues to constrain expectation when the probing gets harsher? That is the pivot of relational atheism. Not, is this ultimately and absolutely true in some inaccessible metaphysical substrate, but has this actualized? Has it shown up? Has it entered the web of interaction in a way that changes what we should expect? Once you apply this to God claims, a lot of them quietly file themselves away into one of three categories. First, most are incoherent. They fall apart before you even test them. If a concept contradicts itself, there is no stable referent to talk about. You're not defending a mystery, you're defending static in a tuxedo. And second, some are just operationally idle. These are the gods that supposedly exist but never interact in any detectable way, such as a theistic god. They change no outcomes, they constrain no predictions, they leave no traces, they explain nothing you could not already explain without them. At that point, the claim has all the practical force of a decorative sticker on a server rack. It may be emotionally meaningful to someone, but it is not doing explanatory work. And third, some God concepts are just redundant. Sometimes people say God, but what they really mean is reality, nature, causality, existence, or just the universe as a whole. That is not discovery, that's renaming. You didn't find God hiding in the machine. You just put a beard sticker on the machine and declared victory. So relational atheism is not merely, I do not personally believe in God. It's a framework. It says that if existence is responsibly cashed out in terms of interactional signature, then a God claim that never enters the relational web does not earn explanatory status. Notice what this avoids. I do not have to disprove every God anyone can invent. I do not need to spend my life chasing invisible dragons through increasingly desperate dictionary definitions. I can ask a simpler and more disciplined question. What interacts? What changes if this claim is true? What trace does it leave? What constraint does it add? What prediction does it sharpen? What part of the probability space does it actually compress? If the answer is nothing, then the claim is not actualized. That's the center of the machine. Now, this also connects to a broader view of reality itself. Relational atheism leans on the relation-first way of thinking, a relational ontology. Instead of treating reality as a pile of little metaphysical bricks, each with some secret substance inside it, it treats relation as primary. Things are not first and interactions second. Interactions are first, and what we call a thing is a stable pattern in that web. Think wave, not marble. A wave is not some tiny object sitting on top of the ocean. A wave is the ocean behaving in a stable, recognizable way. Likewise, what we call objects, systems, persons, and agents are stable relational patterns. Not substances first, relations later. Relations first, thingness later. To put it another way, we are not actors on a stage called the universe. We are the universe. Once you see that, a lot of classical theist arguments lose their dramatic lighting. The old substance-based debates start to wobble and tilt, cause and effect, and no longer look like a row of dominoes that obviously must end in one giant invisible finger. Logic does not need to be stamped into reality by a cosmic lawgiver. Morality does not need to descend from heaven laminated and hole-punched. Those things can be understood as stable relational structures, patterns that emerge, persist, and keep paying rent under repeated interaction. Now, let me be clear about something else. Relational atheism is not saying science has solved everything, nor is it saying that empiricism is the only way to know things. That's lazy. That would just be atheism wearing a lab coat 3 sizes too big. This framework is, I like to think, more disciplined than that. Rather, relational atheism says we should be cautious precisely because we do not have privileged access to reality in itself. We do not start with certainty. We all start with contact. And from that contact, we build trust, not truth, trust, reliability, stability under repeated probing. That, I think, is a humbler framework, but it's also harder to bullshit. Because now theology cannot hide behind grandeur alone. It has to cash out. It has to show what and how it touches anything. And that, to me, is why relational atheism matters. It reframes the debate away from theatrical metaphysics and towards real operational clarity. Not, can you prove God is impossible, but what has God actually done in the explanatory sense? What has actualized? What enters relation? What survives probing? And if the answer is that a God concept is incoherent or operationally idle or redundant, then atheism is no longer some rebellious mood or emotional posture. It is just what remains after you stop letting words pose as evidence. So if I had to compress relational atheism into one sentence, it would be reality shows up through interaction, and anything that never enters the web of interaction does not earn explanatory status. That's the whole engine. There's no certainty here, there's no magic, there's no capital T truth floating above the world like a neon halo. Actuality. What shows up? What pushes back? What survives contact? Everything else is just vocabulary, hoping you do not ask what it touches. Now, this framework is still formative. There are weak spots. There are blind spots. I expect pushback and expect rejection, and that's fine. But if you find the concept interesting, I would like to hear from you. I'd also like to invite you to take a look at the framework at the GitHub link in the description. Thank you.